Yes, sir, ladies and gentlemen, for the man himself, Gypsy.
Thank you very much. A very pleasant good evening to all you wonderful folks in Grenada. Check out my complexion. Take a look at me and tell me, am I what I am today, or am I still what I used to be? If you say yes, well then I would prove you wrong. If you say no, well then I'll go with you strong. Because I know the black man of today is not what he used to be yesterday. No, he's moved from the cotton fields and from the bondage of slavery right into major universities, graduating with honor and degrees. So many doctors and lawyers, presidents, prime ministers, who not so long were mere slaves and indentures. My friend, what else can I say? But the black man have really come a long way. La la la, la 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 la, la 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 la. Some still calls him stupid, ignorant and dumb, ignoring completely the conditions and where he came from, deprived of his right to learn, and yet still he learn, and in any field he can hold his own. This is not no questionnaire or quiz, but if that's not progress, you tell me what is. Moving from the cotton fields and from the bondage of slavery right into major universities and graduating with honor and degrees. So many doctors and lawyers, president, prime ministers, who not so long were mere slaves and indentures. There's not much more I can say, but the black man have really come a long way. La 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 la, la 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 la. Hats off to the black man, brother. I know we have come real far, but that doesn't say now we have to stay right where we are. Keep on moving up. I beg you, don't stop. There is always room for us at the top. Teach our children the things that are right, cause the black man is yet to reach his real height. Though he's moved from the cotton fields and from the bondage of slavery right into major universities, still graduating with honor and degrees. So many doctors and lawyers, president, prime ministers, who not so long couldn't be more than slaves and indentures. My friend, what else can I say? But the black man have really come a long way. Whoa, 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 whoa. La 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 la. Thank you. Thank you. From deprived of his right to learn, and yet still he learn, and in any field he can hold his own. This is not no questionnaire or quiz, but if that's not progress, you tell me what is. Moving from the cotton fields and from the bondage of slavery right into major universities and graduating with honor and degrees. So many doctors and lawyers, president, prime ministers, who not so long were mere slaves and indentures. There's not much more I can say, but the black man have really come a long way. La 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 la, la 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 la. Whoa. Hats off to the black man, brother. I know we have come real far, but that doesn't say now we have to stay right where we are. Keep on moving up. I beg you, don't stop. There is always room for us at the top. Teach our children the things that are right, cause the black man is yet to reach his real height. Though he's moved from the cotton fields and from the bondage of slavery right into major universities, still graduating with honor and degree. So many doctors and lawyers, president, prime ministers, who not so long couldn't be more than slaves and indentures. My friend, what else can I say? But the black man have really come a long way. Whoa, 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 whoa. La 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 la.
Oh yes, oh yes. Good evening to you. Winston Peters, the gypsy, the black man, has really come a long way. You know, we got to be careful. That's why, thank God for the Calypsonians. You know, he said the black man come from the cotton fields of slavery. And now he is in major universities. He's using the university there in not always in the literary sense. In the literal sense, he's using the university there metaphorically to measure where the black man as black woman has come from the field. And then he says, we have to keep on rising, as Maya Angelou would say. But a couple of decades ago, Mr. Hoyt says, you know, we have to look beyond the horizon. We have to keep on rising. And there are people in Guyana who take that to mean that Mr. Hoyt is saying that black people don't look beyond the horizon. Keep on rising. Don't stop. Don't stop. Every group, every country in the world, every lead in the world tells her people or his people to keep on rising. To keep on rising. But when a black leader tells black people, you know, they must rise, they must look beyond the horizon. The black stallion said, look on the brighter side, for the bright side is where we going. Martin Carter said, I rise again for freedom. It's a white road with green grass. Like I can quote poems. I can quote when Mr. Hoyt said, we must look beyond the horizon. He was speaking in that tradition. Dr. King said, I've been to the mountain and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but we as a people will get there. We are always moving on. Bob Marley said, the movement of Jah people, we are always moving on and moving up. And like the Maroons moving out of the plantation. Yet, a big educated man like Ravi says Mr. Hoyt is saying that black people are where we are because we don't look beyond the horizon. This is an educated man. That is the essence of racism. Good evening and welcome to Politics 101. We're going to be doing it tonight because we are in the battle of our lives. Black people. Right before our very eyes, they're rewriting our history and creating a place for us. You see, racism itself is a judgment, you know. It's a judgment. You look at the skin color and you make a judgment of this color to justify enslavement. That is how the notion of race came into being. Plantation slavery preceded race. Race arose out of plantation slavery. Race as a construct was created to justify plantation slavery. In Guyana, we say we are living in an ethnic autocracy. Some say we are living in an emerging apartheid system. Some say we are living in a racist country. But people like Ravi are looking at that ethnic autocracy. They're looking at the discrimination against blacks, the anti-black discrimination. And they're justifying it by saying those black people, these black people, we black people, we are where we are not because a system, a state is discriminating against us. It's because we are feeble mentally and culturally. That's the argument Ravi Dev is making in 2024. The man has ducked his head way back in the 1750s when the notion of race developed in the United States of America. And he's sitting there and pretending he doesn't know what he's doing. And you wonder why our Indian brothers and sisters will meet Mr. Tom on the road. And he just tell them, don't park there. And the first word that comes from their mouth is black inferior self. You're wondering. Ravi Dev says, oh, a big upstanding man like Driver Tom. I was surprised. But you, Ravi Dev, you are saying that Mr. Tom is worth nothing compared with other groups. Because he's culturally backward. Good evening. Welcome to Politics 101. We have a full house tonight, and we're going to talk through this because it's important for us to talk through this, because some of us black people, we still haven't caught on to how dangerous race is and racism is. We haven't caught on to it. In a sense, we didn't, we have gone through the Black Power movement, we have come out of segregation, come out of colonialism, come out of slavery. And we don't quite get it that we are still living in what Quayana calls, we are still experiencing the scars of bondage. As Brother Bob said, every time I hear the crack of the whip, my blood runs cold. 400 years and the same old missed philosophy. So some of us black people still ain't get it. We still don't recognize race if it come in front of we face. When the PPP dress up them little black girls and boys with red jersey and carry them we say, the PPP is bribing black people. Well, they are bribing black people, but what is the thinking behind it? And that is where sometimes some of us fall down, because we avoid talking about race. And what racists like the best is when you don't talk about race, because they carry out their racism and they call it something else. In 2024, you watch a proud people, or a people who say that we are proud, and we know that we are a proud people, a long history. You watch us and feel that the way to try to get us to vote for you is to come into our community with a couple of dollars and a bag of fried rice. In 2024, you are doing that and not recognizing how racially insensitive that is. And when I said it's slave catching, you get vexed because you don't want us to make the connection between the method of slavery and the method that this government is using under the guise that it's looking for votes. It's not looking for votes. It's looking for people to subdue. That's what it's doing. Welcome to Politics 101 on a Thursday night. I think my panel is ready, so I'll bring them in and let's start this conversation. Brother Tacuma Ogunseye needs no introduction. Vincent Alexander needs no introduction. Brother Eric Phillips needs no introduction. Brothers, welcome to Politics 101.
Jambo, welcome.
Welcome, Dr. Hines, and your viewers.
Vincent, let me start with you. Am I going over the top in my analysis of what that fellow Mr. Ravi Dev was doing on the Freddie Kissoon show the other night? And what he has always done, but he is becoming much more explicit. Am I going over the top? Your audio, Vincent.
Your mic.
While we're waiting on Vincent there, you ready, Vincent? We're still not hearing you. Your mic is still not. We're still not. Yes. Eric, you want to go while Vincent is fixing?
You hear me now?
Yes, I'm
hearing you now.
Yes.
Right. I don't think you were going over the top. Ravi Dev himself said in his presentation last night that he had taken a decision to say these things, although he knows that these things would be offensive. That in the past he might have been restrained. He's getting old. Now he's getting old. He's not holding back. He's saying it as he sees it. What's interesting for me is that as he sees it, one may well go back to his entree into the politics of Guyana and his earlier articles in this Stabrook News, I think it was. And if one reads those, one could see that, in fact, what has occurred, he's gone back in the sense to where he was at that time. So there was a period between then and now when there was some kind of moderation. But he himself has said, look, I'm saying it as I see it. But in saying that he is saying it as he sees it, he's trying to find a factual basis, which in fact is fallacious. He's trying to find a factual basis that's fallacious. And I would, in the first instance, like to dismantle his factual basis. Because once that is dismantled, then his analysis has no grounding. No grounding. So allow me to say a few things about his factual basis. He starts off by saying, look, that Burnham empowered Indians at the backs of black people, and he uses the rice industry. And he gives a specific example of the establishment of the Rice Board. The fact of the matter is, the Rice Board was established in 1946. And was established with the set purpose he is saying that Burnham used. In 1946, the Rice Board was established with the purpose of purchase of rice and sale of rice in 1946. What he's accusing Burnham of is purchasing rice and selling it and having a big difference in the price between purchase price and sale price. And somehow or other, the money, the difference goes to the interest of black people. So in the first instance, he's false, because this question of the sale and purchase of rights goes back to 1946, before we got independence, before the PPP came into existence. Burnham and Rice, you can say in 1972, there was a bringing together of the Rice Board and the Rice Development Company. But both pre-existed Burnham, both the Development Company and the Rice Board. And the Rice Board served that purpose as of 1946. He also went on to kind of, in some regards, on this matter of empowerment, call Hoyt's name and Burnham's name together. And if you take Rice as an example, it is Hoyt who introduced private sale of rice in 1985-86. Hoyt introduced that. So how could you, even if he's right about Burnham, how could you call Hoyt's name with Burnham when Hoyt was the one who allowed Cayman Sankar in 1985-86 to be the first exporter of rice? Suffice to say that if you talk rice, you have to recognize you're talking about an industry in which the Indo-Guyanese had greater access and access under better conditions to land than the Afro-Guyanese would have had. Now, I'm not saying the Afro-Guyanese were going to be big in rice, though they were in rice as well. They were in rice. You know, you go to a village like Kingalee, West Berbice, Afro-Guyanese were in rice. But the fact of the matter is that the access to the land, Indo-Guyanese had a greater access, more liberal access to land, and the Africans who had to purchase the villages after emancipation. He then goes on to talk about the bauxite industry and seeks to suggest the bauxite industry, with the electricity that was given to the bauxite workers, was an advantage that people of African descent had. But there are two things about that. That has no correlation in relation to the disempowerment of Indians. That's a separate geographic arrangement. It has no correlation with any trickle-down effect on the people, on Indians. That's the first point I wanted. But how could he dare talk about the bauxite industry in that way when he ignores the fact that in the sugar industry, most of the sugar workers lived in what may be referred to as extra-nuclear villages. They didn't live in the traditional villages. Traditional villages, people of African descent, were taxed. In the extra-nuclear areas, there were no taxes. Indians were not taxed. But in addition to not being taxed, sugar industry provided welfare. They provided health centers, they provided water, they provided infrastructure, and under the sugar industry labor welfare fund, Indians were given land at $1 per house lot. So that you can't say that the benefits, welfare benefits the Afro-Guyanese might have had in Linden was a source of disempowerment of the Indians and riding on the back of Indians, because in no way bauxite has anything to do with riding on the back of Indians. But not at the same time consider that in the sugar industry, there were welfare measures that trumped, in some regards, the welfare measures in the bauxite industry. Suffice to say that the fact that the bauxite industry had black leadership has to do with The geography in the main. When the bauxite industry was created, nobody stopped Indians from migrating from where they lived to go and work in the bauxite industry. But the blacks migrated. And so when it came to nationalization, it was the blacks who were in that industry through a process of migration that took place that in no form represented a discrimination against the people of Indian descent. So the point I'm making, because I shouldn't really go on and monopolize, is that his factual bases are wrong, are fallacious. And the extent to which his factual bases are fallacious, then his analysis has no ground upon which to stand. And I rather suspect we're going to say more about the analysis, me having laid this factual basis, put this factual basis aside. Let me say one more thing. We talked about the KSIs, as if the KSIs again were a mechanism to shut down the Indo-Guyanese who were involved in trading. The KSIs came into existence at the time when there was scarcity. And it was a mechanism for distribution to make sure, we had this whole like the people cooperative units, and anybody could have formed a so-called KSI in their cooperative unit. But the fact of the matter is, during the period of the KSIs, parallel to the KSIs, it was the period of trade in the country. The most from contraband were our brothers and sisters because of that period of contraband. That in fact, Indo-Guyanese could have emerged in a better economic position than Afro-Guyanese in 1992. So that this state of imposition he's talking about, in fact, was a facilitation of the emergence of Indo-Guyanese ahead of Afro-Guyanese in 1992, given that historically they also had advantages in terms of economic activity and in terms of the burden of funding the state, because it is the Afro-Guyanese in the main who funded the state by virtue of being state employees and who had to pay taxes whether they liked it or not, PAYE, as opposed to other sectors where we well know that taxes were not paid and therefore they were not contributing to the revenue of the state the same manner as Afro-Guyanese were. Let me stop here for the time being.
Thank you very much, Vincent. And your point is so well taken about searching for factual basis for a fallacious analysis and conclusion, because that's what race is. That's exactly what race is. They enslaved African and then had to answer the question, why enslave these African people and not the native Indians and not the Europeans? And the answer, they then go searching for the answer. And as you all know, they went to the Bible first, and they found Shem and Ham. And the descendants of Ham had migrated to Africa and so forth. And they said, Noah had cursed Ham because Ham see naked. So these people that we are enslaving are the descendants of Ham. And so they are inferior. All right? And then when they weren't satisfied with religion, where next they went? They went to science. Science. And ask science to find that African people are inferior. And as we know, if you ask science to make a gun and make a bomb, they make a gun and make a bomb. And science, the science of eugenics, then take the human skull and start measuring it, and decided that the African skull was longer, and so Africans were closer to the primitive, the monkeys. So what Dev is doing is the classic racism, which is to arrive at your conclusion that people are inferior, and then you go looking for facts. And the facts are often not on your side. So I'm very glad you started here. Tacuma, let me bring you in here. Am I over the top? Am I
No,
over
no, no, you're not over the top. But I think that we have to be very strategic when we deal with Rafi Dev. Now, Rafi Dev is not trying to engage in any civilized discourse on race and the economic and social problems in the country. He is taking a political stand that at this present juncture in the country and in the world, there is the real possibility of Indian ascendancy. And I don't have no problem with any Indian person or anybody from any ethnic group who have a sense at a global level of the ascendancy of the people. My problem is how you engage in the domestic space. And Rafi and them realize that given the way history unfold and the economic development of the country unfold, the population injection of Indians in large numbers, and that, and I'm being generous.
Well, I don't
There's
want
no
you to be
argument
generous,
that
Ogun. We don't want you to be generous.
no, I'm being generous in what I'm saying. No, I'm being generous. What I'm saying, no, I'm saying because I'm not clear. I don't have the exact figures in my head, but I'm saying there could be no argument that 50 years after the arrival of Indians in Guyana, given the way in which the Europeans structure the economy, okay, and the various relationships, that Indians had the dominance in numbers, they've already got the dominance in the economic life of the country. And 50 years is a lot. It happened before 50 years, but I know I can't be disputed if I use 50 years. So what we're dealing here with is that domination that they acquire 50 years after they arrive, they have never lost it, and they have been able to build on it. And I have no problems with the fact that a colonized people, exploited people in a system fashioned by white people, whether consciously or unconsciously, they have been able to make, take it to make advantage of it and evolve in a certain position. I have no problem with that. I have problem with when not the Indian masses, when the intellectual thinkers and the leaders, okay, is prepared to deny the historical advantages that they got as people coming enslavement and people who come in and added their labor to society that already had the infrastructure, okay, the estates and so forth and so forth. So Indian, they argue about how Indians save the estates and Indian make productivity the sugar. But they didn't have to build it like how we build it from scratch. Therefore, their productivity is almost automatic. Okay, but it was built on African deprivation and enslavement. And Rapidem is not looking for a solution. They're looking to push Guyana in a way that the Indian dominance in the entire country will continue as it is. And they don't want an adjustment of it. They're not looking for economic parity, as colonized people. So we're not engaged in this in any real patriotic experiment with them or engagement with them for better Guyana. This is their politics is to facilitate the PAP domination and their sense of Indian domination in Guyana. And this way you face them. Therefore, you can't have what we're trying to do here is a civilized discussion with people who are not prepared to have a civilized discussion. And the problem I have is that Africans have to answer these challenges not by rhetoric, by changing the balance, okay, and relationship in the society. When your politics have reached a point of that level of arrogance, when your survival is threatened to the extent to which our survival is threatened as a people, you can't argue that out with the oppressor. I mean, and I'm being careful here because Devon not the PPP. And I don't know that he will have ultimately be the ones who were making the decision ultimately when the chips come down. But I'm saying that the African failure to engage in positive and effective resistance is contributing to this impasse.
All right.
And
we
we
will
have
get there,
topic,
Ogun.
not
We're
that
gonna
not
get
dialogue.
there. But you have to appreciate that we have to, in some regard, because we are dealing with generations and new generations of African people who are not of your generation and my generation, who were socialized in the Black Power movement in resistance. Sometimes we have to go over these things for them. So rhetoric becomes important, not to engage Ravi Dev, but to engage our people to understand what is happening before their faces, in order to build up our stock for resistance. Eric, how do you read what Ravi Dev is doing?
Thank you, David. Hello, gentlemen. I think we have to, first of all, understand the timing and context and the personalities involved in this discussion. Rav Ramkaran came out last week saying that we need affirmative action because African Guyanese have been excluded from the economy. First time he said that. Kisun, in the last 2 months, he and I have had several discussions where I brought up the issue of us being called hungry belly dogs, monkey, poison them, the racism of Indians towards Guyanese. And of course, Ravi has not changed. I don't know why you're saying Ravi has changed. Ravi has always been of the view that Africans are inferior to Indians. When he formed ROAR, it was because the PPP wasn't doing enough for Indians. Ravi is a lawyer. Ravi is very educated. Ravi knows exactly what he's doing. He's trying to justify why Indian racism is so intense in Ghana that they've excluded us from oil when there is an abundance. You have to ask yourself the question, so why is he doing it at this time?
Yeah.
Again, it's because the world is seeing the exclusion of Africans and Amerindians from this economy. And I don't want to go down the bottom and hide foxhole because that's where he wants to take us. What Ravi is essentially saying is that Africans and Amerindians are inferior to Indians, and therefore they deserve nothing, as in the Indian caste system. That's what he is essentially saying. He ignores the fact that Africans were unpaid for over 200 years and 400,000 plus died to build Guyana when they didn't have to. He hides from the fact that Indians were paid and got generational wealth from indentureship. Just last week in the newspaper, there was an article about an Indian Muslim who got 10 acres and created Macdoom. Africans never had an opportunity to get land after indentureship. Tacuma brought up the issue of numbers. 239,000 Indians were brought here, 75,000 went back. So in essence, at emancipation, there were 80,000 Africans and 160,000 Indians within 40 years. So their size was twice of us. Ravi Dev is hiding from the fact that Chetty Jagan went to India and empowered Korpalanis and Singha and all sorts of other Indians into this economy when Africans couldn't because there's no one single country called Africa. There are lots of countries. Ravi Dev ignores the fact that in the East Indian colonization scheme, where Guyana was offered to India as a colony, that they were bringing Indians and empowering them, even though Africans were here and died to build Guyana, and they didn't. Ravi Dev is hiding from the fact, as Earl John pointed out, and Tacuma mentioned it, 11,000, no, it was Vincent who mentioned it, 11,000 house lots were given to Indians with a fund to build Indian wealth and communities. And that the sugar estate provided education and health and irrigation and all sorts of other benefits that empowered Indians. Ravi Dev is hiding from the fact, right? And these are all facts, that during the Jagdeo term, there was the greatest transfer of state wealth to an ethnic group ever. He's hiding from the fact that Sarah had over 350 cases of state wealth being given to Indians in many different schemes. Ravi Dev is hiding from the fact that in today's procurement in oil, very little goes to African or indigenous people, all go to Indians, even those who are not qualified. You have people who have never built a road getting $9 billion to build a road. So Ravi Dev, in essence, and Kissoon, because they're now trapped by what I've argued, that Africans are being excluded from the economy and that non-Africans own about 90% of this economy because of oil and the racism in oil, and because Ram Karan is now trying to give an excuse as to why Africans are excluded. If you read his article, he's saying there needs to be affirmative action. And when you look at those reasons, he's giving all the reasons why we were excluded. So what I'm saying, gentlemen, is that Ravi Dev and Kissoon are trying now to cover up what Ram Karan has said. And the only way to cover that up is that by saying we're inferior, we're not capable of being business people. He forgets that the village movement was the greatest entrepreneurial activity in any post-slavery society, where we saved money, where we bought plantations and turned them into villages. And of course, the British did 12 things to destroy our villages. So what is happening today is because of the external pressure, they're trying to say that Burnham and Hoyt empowered Africans, when 99.9% of the empowerment in Guyana has been to Indians. They got land after indentureship to build homes. They got villages. Hurst Durin in Essequibo was a village given to them. So because our population is young and don't know their history, Ravi Dev could make this argument. And you see it being perpetrated even in the education system. When there's common entrance, they show the pictures of the top 10 people trying to give you the idea that Indians are better than Africans. But none of them beat me when I was at QC. I was first or second all my life in QC. So are Africans inferior to Indians educationally? So you got to understand what Ravi Dev and Kissoon set out to do. And you have to understand that Ravi Dev has never changed from his view that Indians are superior to Africans. Let me read something that Clemcy Turan wrote in his article entitled The El Dorado Complex and the Shaping of Indo-Guyanese, a Revisionist Perspective. He said, Dale Bisnaugh observes, at the core of Indian attitudes to the African Guyanese were the malign vestiges of caste thinking. The African Guyanese were said to belong to the Kali or black caste, and were consequently of very low ranking, or of no ranking at all. They're identified as Rawan, the arch enemy of the Indian god hero Rama, a demon figure. And this is why, when the Henry brothers were killed, we didn't seem to understand what was being said to us.
Mhm.
That was a sacrifice. That was murder.
Yes.
Telling to us that we are lower than them and we are like cattle and they could kill us with impunity. So I don't want to go down the Burnham and Hoyt thing because that's where Ravi wants to take us. The reality is saying that Africans are inferior to Indians, period. Amerindians are inferior to Indians, period. And he's trying to use that to justify why we've been excluded from the economy by making the argument subliminally that even if we got empowered, we didn't know what to do with it because we're backward and of lower standing than Indians. That's what is really being here. The timing, the context, and Ramkaran's no statement that we've been excluded from the economy. And there's a time for affirmative action. They've been affirmed since they came here in 1838 through payments in indentureship, through housing. And this is why Ravi has been pushing in the last few months federalism. Again, trying to trap us into Region 4, which is 7,900 square miles, and where they will get the rest of Guyana. This is why his partner in ICDN wrote about 4 years ago that Indians cleared more land than Guyana. And then when I made the argument, okay, Guyana is 80% forest, and the Venn Commission says we cleared 18%, that's 98%. Show me what Indians cleared. There is this attempt by the Indian intellectual to influence the broader Indian mass and the political architecture by saying we are inferior and therefore we could be sacrificed and we should be given nothing because Indians are superior to Africans. I end my argument.
Vincent, you have been, like all of us here at this thing, for a very long time. Part of the tradition coming out of the African Guyanese experience of trying to democratize our plural society, as you keep reminding us all the time that we are a plural society. And ultimately, if this plural society is to work, then we have to find a way to democratize the system and so forth. So you've been at it for a very long time. The coming of oil really has opened up, we say a can of worms, but more than a can of worms. Because the old idea was that if you enlarge the pie, then ethnic groups would have little to fight over because the pie is enlarged and everybody is going to get a piece. But what we have noticed in Guyana is that the pie has enlarged and it has, in a sense, escalated the ethnic divide and the ethnic problem. And now, as Ogun has pointed out, is a case where Indian representative, the Indian capitalist class, the Indian bourgeoisie class, they're in charge of the economy. And they are working in tandem with the Indian political class that controls the government and the state. And therefore, in the context of oil, there is now an opportunity to really, in a sense, once and for all, concretize this divide that has been building over
the caste system. Say it what it is. They want to bring the caste system here, and we're at the bottom of the ladder.
Right. So here is Ravi Dev, Vincent, who's saying the institutional construct in explaining why our ethnic groups are where they are is not the explanation, it's the cultural explanation. And that culture is defining culture in an essentialist way. You're born this way, and Eric is quite right, because that's the caste thing, right? You're born a certain caste, and you die a certain caste, right? And that Black people have some innate cultural traits that do not permit us to exist in a state of freedom, and in a state like where Guyana is, where there is money to be made, we cannot exist in that state. Speak to that issue, because it's very profound that you have been talking about how is it that we can use our history as a guide to solving some of these problems.
David, I want to come to back to that point about we don't look beyond the horizon.
Yes.
When people of African descent got their emancipation and they were able to save money and establish villages, weren't they looking beyond the horizon? The mere act of saving money with the intention of purchasing villages is an act of looking beyond the horizon. When they got into the villages and they sought to become involved in at two levels, economic level in terms of production and in the governance level in terms of management, weren't they looking beyond the horizon? When they were oppressed in those villages were flooded out and things like that, and they sought to move into quote unquote the public sector, weren't they looking beyond the horizon? When in every African Guyanese family, you're told that education is the key to success, aren't we looking beyond the horizon? So that everything that we have done, from rebellion, not accepting slavery, from being emancipated, from villages, from becoming the intelligentsia in the country, everything that we have done is looking beyond the horizon. But in looking beyond that horizon, we have had to face a number of challenges. And in facing those challenges, one may argue that certain traits have emerged. Traits which benefited us, but traits which are not necessarily the best of traits in the environment in which we're existing. Let me explain that. So we developed the trait of education being the source of success, because we experienced that entrepreneurship was not our source of success. So to a very large extent, the African Guyanese, out of his lived experience, emerged into the education as his foundation and stable jobs and all of that, professions as the way to go in life. But that is exactly what we are now criticized for. That we're not entrepreneurial. Suffice to say that when one looks at a society and its development, these things that we are involved in are no lesser important to development than the private sector and its growth. Because development is not merely about wealth. That is why the Chinese used to say you could redistribute and bring about development even in a circumstance where there isn't growth. Because your state of health, your state of education, those are integral indicators of human development. And the extent to which we contribute significantly, and probably more than others, to education, to the health sector, etc., is the extent to which we are making a major or the major contribution to human development. But that human development, that human being, in our circumstance, has been undervalued. And there is this argument that really the people who are producers of tangible things are the real ones in terms of the returns from that production. When in fact, real production is human self-reproduction. And human self-reproduction is not just about the economy. It's about the things that I have mentioned. And therefore, those things should be valued as much as. One of the problems in our society is that those things are not valued as much as. And therefore, the African Guyanese and whoever else ends up in those sectors are treated almost as if they're parasitic, as if they're living off of the efforts of others and they're not contributors. And the PPP has subtly in the past, from an ideological perspective, using the Marxist idea of the working class being the real producers of wealth, have subtly ingrained the thinking that African Guyanese are not real involved in the real development process and therefore are not worthy of the returns for their contribution because their contribution is not what growth is about, what development is about. When in fact, we have gotten to the point where it is clearly understood that economic growth is not in itself development. And economic growth could occur in a circumstance where there is no development, as is occurring now in Guyana, because the economy is growing, but the people at large are not benefiting, and therefore real development is not occurring. What is happening is that a certain class of people have captured that wealth and are using it for themselves. And one other critical point to make in this circumstance is that we may get down to the argument that this thing is really our class. The truth of the matter is this, that whilst objectively it may be about class, we're dealing with different communities, plural society. We don't all see life the same. And so in one sector of our society, there are those who accept, from an ethnic perspective, the caste arrangement. And therefore, though they are the sufferers, they are prepared not to struggle to come out of that state, because their coming out of that state has to do with the act of reincarnation and rebirth and the good behavior whilst they are in that state, as opposed to the African Guyanese who sees life quite differently. That is why that speaks to the plurality of society. Now, I'm not criticizing them for who they are, but what we have is a situation where a certain set of people and the class that sits upon them happen to be Indians, and they're using their own structural arrangements to have a united interaction with people of African descent whose value systems are different, who do not accept that caste arrangement, and who, if we were to succumb to what they are doing, would be tantamount to being in the caste system, the Dravid at the bottom of the caste system, who must live with it, but we don't believe in coming out of it in reincarnation. And so we have to live it now. And in some regards, our living it now is seen as early gratification because we got to live it now. But even as we live it now, the way in which we socialize ourselves, we look beyond the horizon in relation to the generations to come. And so, whilst we might not be as in the same state they're in terms of material generational wealth, we do a lot in terms of generational wealth that is educational, that is cultural in the narrow sense of the word. And the problem the country is therefore faced with is a non-acceptance of the plurality, and that if we're going to live in the same country, then we have to find ways and means in which we coexist, bearing in mind that coexistence occurs at levels. So we have to coexist at the individual level, communal level, and it's the individual level, the societal level, the communal level, the individual level, the family level, the communal level, and the societal level. And that it is at the societal level we have to agree on how we are going to, in fact, coexist, because that is where we really interact. That is where we have to establish equality across the board, even as the diversity continues to be, as it should be, at the individual, family, and communal level. And I'm using communal level in our circumstances because to a very large extent, we still live in ethnic enclaves.
Ogun, your point of that we can't have a conversation with Ravi Dev, and this conversation is not with them. This conversation is with our people. All right? And you reach logically for something that you've been very consistent with, and that is resistance as a form of breaking down some of these barricades and that are being put up by the intellectuals and activists among the Indian Guyanese elite. But as you listen to Ravi Dev, it's almost that he couldn't help himself. He keeps referring to Hines and Phillips, and every now and again he throws in another name. But he's using Hines and Phillips to really represent all of us who are pushing back against this kind of thing. Don't you think that the resistance that you are saying that we should have more of, and I completely agree with you, don't you think that Ravi Dev himself is aware that there is a serious resistance coming from us? And so therefore, he spends an hour and a half every time he makes a point going back to us. Don't you think that we are doing some good work in terms of fortifying our people against the onslaught that is happening before our very eyes?
No, I mean, I'm surprised you asked me that question because I've always been making the point that we have done an excellent work. The question for African people is not a lack of knowledge of our situation or what is being happening to us. We have done an excellent work to get our people at a level of consciousness, and I don't know how much more consciousness we can build, because we deal with consciousness one-sidedly. Consciousness can be just mental activity. It has to be backed by physical activity. No, and I'm telling you, the problem that we have here is that we have oversaturated our people with verbal consciousness, and we haven't put the organization and physical resistance, okay, to strengthen, okay, and to give real meaning to the mental work that we have done. We have been lopsided. There are people who have in the world who do less of what we do mentally, but they do more concrete things and they got more results. all I'm trying to say is that look, we have done, and especially since COVID, I mean, new social media. I mean, nobody could miss, okay, the impact and the influence that you all have been able to have on the African Guyanese community, the entire community, okay, where they're being addressed on these matters almost on a daily basis in a very intense way. And the level of discourse has been tremendously high on our platforms. You know, and I'm saying that, okay, we have done a good work. We have, in my mind, we have overdone in that area. It's time we rebalance the scale, because I think as an African, philosophically, African thinking is balance. You can't just the one side going down the scale the way, or so you're going to achieve anything. You got to get balance. And what is lacking in this equation is African physical resistance. For instance, they make a lot of noise about African protests and street protests. But throughout the history of this country, everything that African achieve and everything Guyanese achieve through politically and socially, economically, is through protest and resistance. That has been our history. But every oppressor wants to detach you from effective forms of your history, and that's what they're trying to do to Black African people. And we are allowing them because we're playing their game. For instance, I have listened very carefully, and I don't want to go on a count all African street protests historically, okay, from the time African and Indians, meet in Guyana, to see where the scale go. I know where the scale go. I know they've been exaggerating. But okay, I say, okay, there is a basis that at times African protests could lead to attacks on Indians. But here, we could have protests in boxes in African areas, bring the people out in the thousands, and demonstrate to the Indians and Ravi in the world that Africans could protest and occupy the streets, and we didn't touch an Indian. That is the way you shatter, okay, the propaganda. It is time you don't argue it out anymore. You say, every time you come on the streets, we threaten Indian business, we beat up Indians. Look, we bring all them thousands out on the streets there in these African communities. Show me the Indian house or the Indian business that get assault. Show me the Indian that get beat up. That is how we have to break down these things. We reach a point now that we can't argue these things out. We say, look, Africans are at a point where the economic imbalance, we're not like we're at a point in this equation with oil. Even before oil, the Indian domination, the economy, the one-sided domination economy have gotten so out of hand. Whatever is the reason, I don't even want to spend time on the reason, but just the objective fact that is imbalance. And it can't be sustained in a multiracial society, therefore it has to be fixed. Now, if the Indian political leadership is visionless and doesn't understand that they have to enter into historical compromise to fix it, we Africans and Amerindians, but I don't want to speak for Amerindians right now, we Africans who feel that we are facing an existential threat to our existence have to fix it. And that is have to be our approach. And in fixing it, I am certain you won't get solidarity from Indians and other people. But don't expect in this equation that Indians will come to fix your problem. It's you have to fix your problem. And I'm saying that Africans can solve this problem overnight almost in political terms. And we are our worst enemies because we don't want to take decisive action. And we're thinking the way the white people have conditioned us to think, which is against African interests. I don't know which African leader doesn't understand what African face with. You have a situation where before oil, you don't control 10% of the economy. With oil and the way the people behaving, you need any education as to what it means to Africans. Therefore, you have to stop it now. Don't wait till you consolidate. And we know our states, lead to a lot of violence and viciousness. Don't give them the time to consolidate where all of the negatives of the oil state, okay, it develop, because at that time you're going to pay a higher price to dismantle it. Dismantle it now. Stop it now. It is in the process of consolidating. Stop it now. And that is the challenge facing us. Not all of the, we need these discussions, but at a different point in time, we have to bring back sanity to the body politics of the country.
Eric Phillips and Vincent Alexander, the question of resistance that Ogun raises.
Let me answer, David. 1763, Governor Kofi made a proposal. We seem to have not understood what he was saying. If Ravi Dev truly believes that we are inferior to Indians, why should Africans want to live with Indians? Because your fate is known. You'll never grow. You'll always be oppressed. So why not live separately apart? So I'm asking Ravi, if he really believes that we're inferior to him, as has been his thesis throughout his life, should we not have a referendum on splitting this country and the wealth in two? You don't like us? We're inferior to you? Go live by yourself. We go live by ourselves. We died for the country. Half the wealth is ours. So in essence, what Oguns is saying is also right. Nobody's going to solve our problem. We have to solve it. And we have to put the proposals out there. What has happened, though, is that what is going on again is now internationally known. All the African heads of states know what's going on in Guyana. All the Caribbean heads of states going on what's Guyana. The US, the UK, everybody knows what's going on in Guyana. The numbers are there. Who gets all the contracts? Who is accumulating capital? How is capital accumulated in Guyana? Through state assets, through contracts, through money laundering, through gold smuggling, through cocaine smuggling. We're not involved in that. So if we can't get involved in capital accumulation to grow, why do we want to be part of a state that excludes us? And Tacuma is right in that this thing is consolidating very rapidly. Within another 2 to 3 years, we will be outside of this economy. And that imbalance will be more difficult to solve. Look at the contracts. Who gets them and why? People who are unqualified, never built a road, getting billion-dollar contracts to build a road. That is racism. And what Ravi is doing, and what Kisun has been doing, is trying to justify this by saying we're inferior. And what Ralph Ramkaran has done is to throw some water on that by writing that we've been excluded purposefully, even though he tries to justify it with the state of the economy and this and that and that. Ralph Ramkaran knows we've been institutionally, historically, and structurally excluded from this economy. And whereas in his older age, he's trying to say, hey, this is what's happening, Ravi Dev is trying to come up with a reason, a racial reason to justify something that has nothing to do with race. Is he saying that all Africans are inferior to Indians? What's going on in Nigeria, Botswana, in England? You know any property Africans own in England? It's because of the historical racism, the historical enslavement, and the empowerment of Indians in Guyana. That's where we are today. They're no brighter than us. They're no hardworking than us. We built villages. We fought for freedom. They didn't have to fight for freedom. So the philosophical question to Ravi Dev, okay, you tried choice federalism to trap us again with a con artist move because you know that this is unsustainable. And you're talking about dissolution of power. Let's do the real dissolution of power and separate. That's the philosophical question I'm asking Ravi. Given that you've come to this conclusion, in your esteemed intellect, isn't it best for us to separate? I end there.
Vincent, this conversation about resistance and how you deal with racial discrimination and racial oppression and racism is a long discussion. You look at the United States of America and the arguments as to how do you confront the King approach versus the Malcolm approach, the Du Bois's approach versus the Booker T approach, the Garvey approach versus the thing. You go to South Africa during the apartheid era, and the Steve Biko's versus even Nelson Mandela approach and so forth. We have had this long conversation about how you engage and you approach racial oppression. Ogunseye said,
or the Zimbabwe case, don't leave out Zimbabwe.
Zimbabwe, right? Ogunseye said that we have done enough consciousness raising and that we have reached the point to move to something else. Help us, Vincent.
I would say that we have to recognize where we are located in the matrix.
Mm-hmm.
We are located largely in the service sector, but the service sector is critical to the survival of the nation. Therefore, we have to use our sectoral and geographic locations as the places where we turn the screws. Bearing in mind that historically we've seen that at the end of the day, there is something called a negotiated settlement. But people have to be brought to the table. And so we have to use, I repeat, our sectoral location and our geographic location as the places where we turn the screw so that it is recognized that we have to be dealt with on equal footing. And there is where we will have the basis for a final negotiated settlement to the problem. And that negotiated settlement will then deal with the issues of distribution of wealth and the issues of governance, which I would say are the two major issues that confront us. The country's patrimony, how we deal with the country's patrimony, and how we fashion our governance. And the two are interrelated. One doesn't go without the other. Just on the side there, in some regards, Eric, we're separated. In some regards, we're separated. I think all of us say we meet in the marketplace.
Yes.
But the way Guyana has evolved as a nation, as a state, is not conducive. There's no basis for Ravi Dev's federalism. In fact, Ravi Dev's federalism is epitomizes his disposition, because he doesn't mention it these days, but early on he talked about 4 states.
Yes.
Orbis, Demerara, and Essequibo divided into 2. Now, I would have just referenced 2. Demerara is the smallest state.
Less than 10%.
The least endowed state, with the largest population and the largest section of the Indian population. So I don't know how you will have a federal arrangement.
Vincent, I'd like you to use the numbers. Region 4, right, is 7,791 square miles.
Hold on, Eric. He's not hearing you.
You have the largest number of Indians in any one state. So that's the first dysfunctionality of this federalism thing. Second one is this, that he then goes to Essequibo and he gives to the Amerindians the part of Essequibo that is not most endowed. You won't believe that. He gives them Rupununi, right? But he doesn't give them Region 8 and Region 7, where the gold is and where the minerals are. So you can see him laying a claim, in a sense, to Guyana through this argument of federalism. Federalism, which historically has to do with separateness, which we do not have because our counties are mixed and the wealth in our counties have been developed on the back of all of the groups. No one group has a monopoly of the wealth in any county. So you can't say this is yours. You don't have any county where it belongs, even by occupation, to one group. And historically, you don't have any county where one group has been the ones who have created the wealth, things like that. So that's a joke. But our separateness comes in terms of our communities. And therefore, in the resolutions of the problem, the national state has got to be de-emphasized to deal with the issues that are national in that hierarchy I talked about, the individual, the family, the community, and society. So we have to de-emphasize this, the national state. And that is where we have to have the conversation about the national state as we allow the communities far more freedom, both in terms of resources and in terms of governance, to govern themselves. And that must start from the level of the villages, so that a village has the kind of resources to do what villages can do. And then you get to a region having the kind of resources to do what a region can do. And then you peel off from the state much of what it seeks to do and have the area there of compromise and commonality, because then whatever is happening at the national level concerns everybody, both in terms of the internal arrangements and in terms of how we relate with the rest of the world.
Vincent, can I make a comment on this?
Yes, go ahead quickly, Eric.
You know, Ravi understands what happened with India and Pakistan and why it didn't become a federal state. It became two separate states. So I fully understand where Ravi is coming at. I fully appreciate what Ravi wants to do. And we should not underestimate his influence on Indians, because they have a group of intellects who've been pushing this for the last decade. And we have to listen to what Ogun is saying. Ravi is trying to create solutions for us that are suboptimal to us or that will destroy us. We're the ones who have to offer our own solutions. And as much as people don't want to hear the word partition, that discussion has to happen also as part of the options. Because if somebody's telling me, I don't like you, you're lower than me, I'll never give you any economic breathing space, and I'll kill you when I want, and I put the state on you when I want, why do I want to live with you? So if we can't find a solution of mutual and shared governance, and this is not about shared executive power.
Yes,
there's a fundamental problem with physicality of separation, for me.
No, Pakistan and India did it. It was the same situation. So I'm saying, don't let us exclude any solution. Don't let us exclude any solution. Let us look at all the solutions and the pros and cons and comes to the one that makes the sense to everybody. If we can't get shared inclusive governance, and if we can't get any part of the economy, why do we want to be here? It's not about
We,
the incompatibility or the logistic issues of doing it. The more fundamental question: if you can't live as a dignified human being, why do you want to stay in this situation? And therefore, what are the options? Coffee knew what it was.
Yeah,
Coffee
Ogun,
didn't want to share
yeah,
with Guggenheim. You got to
Ogun,
talk about real issues.
Ogun, let me bring you back in
no, my
because
idea does
yeah,
not stand the face of separateness. It doesn't.
No, I'm
Because of
saying
the
it's
way
one
our
of the
community.
options we need to discuss
yeah,
fully.
yeah. Ogun, let me bring you back in because you've raised the question of what is called physical resistance. And based on the comments we're having here, I guess 99.99% of people say, I agree with Ogunseye. I agree with Ogunseye. So our people, we're oversaturated, as you said, with analysis, right? It seems we're oversaturated also with a sense that we need to do something more than analysis. Brother Ogun say, what are the barriers? Because we are a rational people, all right? What are the barriers? So we are agreed that we know what's going on. We are agreed that we know what needs to be done. What are the barriers, Ogun say?
No, I don't want to behave like though I am a God and I know all the solutions to our problems as a people and as a nation. But there's some things that are very clear. One of the big problems we have in this equation is that we have not developed sufficiently an African politics as distinct from party politics. You see, and party politics are being fashioned in a Eurocentric way, and party politics is what the Europeans use to control the empire. So party politics was never intended to empower the locals. It's intended to keep you divided. Okay, so so we're suffering from that, in that our people have been so cultured to party politics that if the party tell them to sneeze, they ain't gonna sneeze. If the party tell them to sneeze, they're likely to sneeze. So that's one of the problems you have, that you condition your people to take political action through the institution of the party, and for whatever reason, the party at this point don't want to have certain kind of street actions and other forms of action. The people, okay, are feel powerless. Okay, the next problem is we we as a country, nothing in the last. Okay, I'm going to reduce it to from the independence struggle. It's beyond that. European white people have been playing an important role in shaping what happened in Guyana. The internal contradictions have never allowed to mature to determine a local outcome in the political contestation. The Americans, the British, and so have always been imposing solutions upon us. So, so in whatever we do, we have always had to take that as a factor. What the Americans can think, what the British can think, what the external people can think, because they are real players in the equation. And we see what happened we see what happened post 2020. We see how the Americans play the politics of the Cold War. We see how they play the politics at the end of the Cold War and the effects again. We see how Trump play his politics okay in 2020. We now see how Biden and them trying to reshape and play the politics. So I'm saying that we got caught in a political culture, okay, that does not allow us to act as independent agents to the extent that objectively we need to act. Now, this brings the question of leadership. You got historical conditioning on one hand, but you have something called leadership. And leadership has to work out whether, look, fear has always been a factor in Guyanese equation. Just like how race have always been a factor. The country was bought in race. So you can, at no point in Guyanese history, you can't say race is not a problem. The same thing with fear. From slavery to now, fear of always being a major factor that influenced resistance, so we have had to overcome fear. And the PPP has built upon that fear and have instituted a level of fear in the country that have affected African people in a very profound way. I've never seen our people in such a bad state. And I'm 72, so I'm not a young person. And I was in the struggle at the age of about 16 or so. And I know all the twists and turns about the struggle. And I'm, as an African activist, I'm telling you, our people have never been in this state of fear as it relates to political action in the history of the country. And I'm saying it's a question of leadership. We have not been having the appropriate leadership at the appropriate time. And I'm telling you, if tomorrow, North and the PNC put 15,000 African people in any part of Guyana, even in the flipping interior, I'm telling you the situation will begin to alter. Because we're demonstrating capacity and you're demonstrating a different mindset. Because, and this is to talk to your people, not just to the PPP yet. African people need to see from their leadership a certain resolve. And my big concern is exactly what happened with the extrajudicial killing situation. When the states, we always had extrajudicial killing from the colonial days. Okay, and so and so. But it reached gigantic levels under the PPP. And the PPP, okay, play with that thing because they want to discipline the African lumpen and disconnect it from support to the PPP, from the PNC. Because the history of the politics is, in the city, the African lumpen support the PNC politically. In the rural areas, the Indian lumpen support the PPP and the sugar workers, whatever political struggle they had. There's the history. And therefore, the PPP is set to use the state and the police, okay, to deal with African lumping in a certain way in order to make them politically ineffective if the PNC need to use them. And it leads to situation get out of hand. And I remember in Askria, in Agda, we have encouraged marches, we have wrote to UN, we have this, and we were saying that this situation, because we were feeling it. We saw when the PPP used the police to shoot at the nurses, okay, when they had the nurses strike. We saw African people, men crying and saying, I'm going to train me for the military, this is what's happening to me, and that kind of thing. I mean, we're cultural and political activists, and we really understood what was happening there. Is that black men were saying, look, man, we can stop this thing. We get enough preparation, okay, to stop this thing. And they cry tears. But back to the extrajudicial killings. When the killings get out of hand, now anybody will know that if you start to kill people willy-nilly as a state, using the police or the army or whatever you want, or private armies, a time will come where people are going to fight back. And what happened is the lumping elements who were the victims of the state execution decide to fight back. And now, unfortunately, we as an African community allow them to take the burden when it's we who's supposed to stop it and make sure that they didn't have to do what they had to do. Politically, if the African political leadership and the middle class and all of the African thinkers had said, look, we understand you're playing here, PPP. Okay? We're going to stop this thing, or we know where it's going to go. But no, we don't have an African politics to defend us in that profound way.
But
and
don't we have to develop that politics, Brother Ogunseye?
Yeah.
I mean,
I'm
your
afraid.
analysis is spot on. But I think don't we have to develop that politics? You see, the point is, I'm saying politics don't always go in a straight line. There are times when things come to the fore and the forces gather, you have an explosion. And from time to time, we have had that. We are at the point now where you are, and I completely agree with you. And I don't think that Vincent and Eric will disagree with you, that we have to develop a new African politics. Don't you think Ravi Dev and them are very fearful that we are developing that new African politics?
Yes, but if we are different with
All
you.
right, so
With you.
speak
Here
to that.
we're different with you. No, here,
Right.
no, here we're different. No. We have to work with these little subtle differences.
Yeah.
I am saying that we're not going to develop the consciousness in a one-sided way. I am saying we have to engage in action as well as education. Look, let me tell you something. We got this whole question about how the PPP is using the state to buy African people, and the people are going but we know the history. If you impoverish your people, okay, and you're in a market economy, okay, a time will come that a certain percentage of people, regardless of the political views, will go and eat out your hand because they have no alternative. You know the way how you think you stop them is by telling people don't go eat out the PP hand. If you make it impossible for the PPP, okay, to come in your community and do what you're doing, and make it impossible for people to eat out the PP hand. That is how you stop those things all over the world. You don't stop it. You don't stop it simply by you got a man hungry. You got children for money. You think I'll stop. If tomorrow somebody decide, we saying we know how we got a peace in Guyana, everything is quiet, this and that. People operate. That is why all oppressors want stability, because stability allows those who in power to continue the oppression. But if tomorrow, for some reason, there is an earthquake, break the road from the East Bank and break the road from the East Coast, you think Guyana and Georgetown be normal? You think that you got any question whether people go to work, whether you want strike or you want strike? The objective change in the physical environment, change the mental and change the physical relationship of people with the productive sector and with the political sector. And this is what we got to understand. You see, we have too much of theoreticians and too few political practitioners. Are, I don't want to say revolutionary. Come and say, I thought that we dignify these things. Guyana is not no state for any revolution in any profound way. So I'm not talking about profound revolution. I am talking about the normal things that happen in a democratic society, what happened throughout our history, okay, in the colonial days, okay, and so forth and so forth. We get back to them. We're not a revolution yet. We're far from them. So I'm not talking about them because we're not in a state for revolution. But we must be in a state, as far as the African community is concerned, we must get quickly in a state where we put on the agenda the governance of the country and we say we had enough. Guyana is not going to go forward in the present governance arrangement, and we are prepared to bring this country to halt and pay whatever the price we have to pay for renovation of governance. That is where we reach. I don't know.
I think we are going there without using the language that you're using. I think we are doing exactly that. Is my firm view that there is a way in which human beings respond to their conditions, that sometimes we, the political leaders, are not appreciative. We don't see the little nuances as they engage. And all it takes is for a moment. And
David, you're right. All it takes is a mistake.
Sometimes you don't have to force the situation too much. And you go ahead, Eric.
No, David, you're right. I travel in the bus every other day. And all it will take is one mistake or one incident. Because you feel it, you sense it, the desperation, the anger. And I know that the president and vice president and Ravi understand
They
that.
understand that. They're terrified of it. They're terrified of it. I understand what Ogun is saying. But I don't think Ogun understands
The
that the
dynamic
other
right
side
now.
has more intelligence on us than we have on ourselves.
Yes.
To understand that the point that Ogun is urging us to get, that we are probably there
This
already.
slippery slope has already started.
Yeah, we're probably there already.
I'm seeing it, I'm hearing it, I'm feeling it. And
They
then you
would
see
like to
things
get
like
rid of
Tom.
it.
What happened to Ivor Tom?
Yeah,
There are these little things that just add
yes.
to, I mean, it's just a mess.
I think we are there already. I think we are there already. As I said, in struggle, you don't only look at how you see the world or see yourself. You look at how others see you and what they do. And the way in which this government is pounding us and they're in a hurry is because they recognize that there is resistance.
And that's why Ram Quran came out with that article. He censors it too.
No, but I agree with you. But all I'm saying is we got to hasten the pace. You see, remember
Well,
here.
well,
The thing about here, the thing about oppression,
you're an
the thing about
old
oppression,
revolution.
the-
You're
the-
an
the
old
thing about
revolutionary.
oppression,
And
the
you
thing
know
about
that.
the thing about oppression
Yeah,
is timing and measurement.
yeah.
Every oppressor, I have always been arguing that the PAP is not stupid. The PAP know that if Africans decide to behave in a certain way, they got to come to the table. At present, but the PAP playing a time game. They know that if they continue to get us in the present state that we have, and they get 2 or 3 more years with oil and they consolidate, they're going to undermine all of the strategic areas that we have find ourselves in a state that could apply pressure to them. So this is a time factor game. So it's not just I know they're concerned, but I also know, okay, they're working with a timetable, and I'm saying strategically, I got to upset your timetable. You want 3 years,
David,
I give you 2 months.
David, the teacher strike was a moment that was one of those moments. And there are many other moments like that happening. And again, I agree with Tacuma, it's leadership. It's leadership of fear. This is a society of fear.
Vincent, the political party fear leadership, pragmatic leadership, as opposed to a militant leadership that says we are here, let's do it. What?
I think the issue is leadership. But I don't think the issue is simply leadership emanating from a political party. I think it's leadership that has its origins in the community and in the sectors which I referred to. And the pulling together of that leadership in action. It's not just leadership from a political party. The political party may be driven if they see that occurring. They may be driven.
Yeah.
But I think it has to start somewhere else.
Yeah.
Sectoral and community leadership.
Yeah.
That's how it always happens. The political parties are going to be hesitant, and then they'll be pulled along with a wave, and they have no choice.
Yeah. I think it's happening. You look at the way in which the other side is trying to separate us. Nigel going to Lenora Market and this body going there and so on. I think they recognize that our people are at the point where they've gotten up to here, right? I think they recognize that. And I think we have to recognize that. But we also have to recognize that there are realities that face us. All right? We had the experience of the 1960s. It's still relatively fresh on our national psyche, right? We live in a world that is complex. Guyana is perhaps one of the most complex countries in the world. And I think we have to work it.
It's not complex, David. It's racist. It's not complex. It's racist.
I think we have to work it through. I think we have gotten to the point where we are pulling things together and we are forcing action on the other side, acts of desperation on the other side. And we have to be very careful. That
Ravi Dev's presentation is an act of desperation.
oh yes, oh yes, oh yes, oh yes, oh yes, oh yes. Brothers, we have been at it now for almost 2 hours. Your quick closing thoughts as we close off this segment tonight. Starting with you, Ogun.
Okay, I want to close very quickly by saying that it is, I'm sad and it's a tragedy that African and Indians and Amerindians and others who have been a victim of white colonialism and domination, faced for the first time with an opportunity that we could use oil, okay, to reconstruct our historical negatives in the society, which none of us are really responsible. Whatever advantage the Indians get in the process, okay, during indentions, so they couldn't get themselves. So we all understand, okay, the sabotage of the African economy and keeping the African in a certain position and keeping the Americans in the interland and so forth. All these are machinations of the colonial state, the white people, colonialism and so on. And we have for the first time a chance, okay, to have money that we could begin a genuine process of independence, because independence really doesn't mean anything. It's correcting historical imbalances and injustices. And we have leaders, both in government and out of government, who will argue against the fact that the African condition is a reflection of slavery and the denial of hundreds of years of generational wealth. And they will argue that the Amerindian economic condition and social condition is not an effect of the same process. It is, and it is a tragic moment. I mean, I resolved those matters at 16 in classes in Askrio. That I have, since at age of 16, I have agreed, we have come to an agreement and enlightenment that this is the reality of Guyana, this is what independence means. But after 72 years, I'm 72 now, and I got to deal with this backwardness. And I'm thinking it's tragic, and this will be passing on to the next generation. And I am fearful. We have not prepared the next generation to manage Guyana with this oil thing and all the challenges that the world and the exploiters and the vultures going to come in this country, okay, and the machinations that they can do to this country. We prepare young people for them. And therefore, they're likely to end up into pointless blood slaughtering. And I want us, this generation of us, okay, who will be 70s and be 60s, we have to get the leadership and stop it. The younger generation can't deal with it. They haven't been prepared for it. And if we don't do it, okay, we do a disservice to the country and the young generation. We have to stop it. This is the last generation who have some amount of social understanding enough of the past, a sense of what's likely to happen to the future, and we have to stop it now.
Eric, closing thoughts?
There's been a concerted effort to make Guyana an ethnic state. All the symptoms are there. The contracts, the budget, how money is spent, who is empowered. But I think all of us need to understand that Guyana is in geopolitical play right now because of oil. And there are external factors and external groups who will not want this country to go up in an uproar. And so they're mitigating factors. And I do honestly believe that the PPP understands this and that they know this becoming an ethnic state isn't going to happen. But there are still other actors who are trying to give a justification as to why it should happen. I think within the next year, a lot of things will change. The geopolitics of the world is changing. The geopolitics of CARICOM is changing. And so I have hope that there are people smart enough in the parties to bring this issue to its essence, because we're on that slippery slope where people are getting entirely fed up, and that's a dangerous environment for all of us.
Vincent?
I think that if we look at the landscape carefully, we will see that there's a realization that things are happening and there are platitudinous responses to those things. So it means the things are having some impact. What is absent and what is necessary is trusted, selfless leadership.
Yep.
The moment is upon us.
Yep.
It requires trusted, selfless leadership.
Thank you, Vincent Alexander. What a note to finish on. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Tacuma. We're going to continue this conversation next week because it is important. I know when my brother Ogun said that we over theorize and rhetoric, I know he doesn't mean it in the literal sense. Because his presence on this program tonight and his rhetoric and his theorizing is important in rallying our people. We are almost there. We are almost there. Old people say, 2 morning more. Thank you, my brothers. And thank you, the audience. We are doing it. We are doing it. When I hear the Ravi devs of this world, I know that we are doing something right. And I know that they know that we are there. I agree with Vincent Alexander. I agree with Vincent Alexander. It's the leadership. But we are there. We are there. You all, the people, have to make some intentional choices. Leadership doesn't fall from the sky. Leadership comes out of the circumstances that we have. And like I said, I think we're getting there, and I think they know that we're almost there. If they can put the 4 of us who are here tonight and the rest, some of the rest of the leaders in jail, they jail us tomorrow. Because in their minds, we represent the beginnings, the shaping of that leadership to take this to the next and to a solution that takes into consideration the objective and subjective realities of Guyana. At the end of the day, we ain't going back to Africa. We ain't going back to India and China and wherever. We all got to live on this place here. And we have a responsibility as leaders of all ethnic groups to recognize that that solution has to be a solution that is based on an understanding that we have to be alive to enjoy that solution. To enjoy that solution. They're pushing us because they want a certain kind of response so they can use an excuse to do what they want to do. But we gotta be smart. We gotta be smart, and I think we have been very smart. We have been very smart. We are doing it. We are doing it. And I think in the end, we are going to win. We are going to win. See you all tomorrow night.